0900 hours, Western Pacific Ocean. The sun hangs high above a boundless expanse of sapphire water, reflecting off the cockpit glass with a blinding, crystalline intensity. At 30,000 feet, the air is thin and freezing. But inside the pressurized cockpits, the only sound is the steady, rhythmic hiss of oxygen flowing through flight masks. 4 fighter jets fly in a tight finger-4 formation, their gray wings slicing through the thin atmosphere with effortless grace. Below them, a layer of white stratus clouds stretches to the horizon like a field of frozen cotton. The pilots sit motionless, encased in high-tech flight suits, their gloved hands resting lightly on the control sticks as they monitor the quiet green glow of their primary displays. The calm shatters as a frantic series of high-pitched chirps erupts from the threat receivers. On the tactical data link, a massive pulsing red icon appears, representing a heavy command and control aircraft deep within enemy airspace. Behind it, a swarm of smaller red triangles maneuvers into an intercept vector. The lead pilot grips the throttle, and the hum of the engines shifts into a low, predatory growl. The serene blue horizon is suddenly cluttered with digital symbology, marking the arrival of a massive hostile force. "Contact! Multiple bogies, high and fast!" a voice barks over the encrypted channel. The lead fighter jet tilts its nose upward, the engines roaring as they transition into full afterburner. Twin columns of orange flame erupt from the exhaust nozzles, pushing the aircraft through the sound barrier with a violent, physical jolt. The formation breaks apart, each jet banking sharply toward the incoming threat. Far to the west, thin white contrails begin to streak across the sky. The first volleys of long-range missiles already hunting for heat and metal. The sky transforms into a chaotic web of smoke and fire. A massive missile streaks past the lead jet, missing the wingtip by mere feet. The wake turbulence tosses the 30-ton aircraft like a toy. The pilot grunts as the G-force pins him into his seat, his skin pulling tight against his skull. He slams a button on his stick, and a cloud of burning magnesium flares pours from the belly of the jet, arching backward to distract the incoming ordnance. A nearby missile finds its mark on a decoy, exploding in a massive sphere of orange fire and jagged shrapnel that peppers the clouds below. The American pilots push their throttles forward, diving into the heart of the enemy formation. They ignore the smaller escort ships, focusing entirely on the massive AWACS plane lumbering in the distance. The flight lead pulls his jet into a vertical climb, the world spinning as he executes a high-speed roll to avoid a spray of cannon fire from an unseen attack. Metal groans under the immense pressure of the maneuver. In the rear of the enemy formation, the massive radar plane begins to bank away, its crew desperately trying to retreat under the cover of their escort's fire. The tactical situation shifts rapidly. The flight lead stabilizes his craft and locks his sensors onto the lead escort. He pulls the trigger. A white-hot streak of light leaps from the underwing rail, the missile accelerating instantly to 3 times the speed of sound. It slams into the wing root of a hostile fighter, tearing the wing clean off. The enemy jet spins wildly, fuel spraying from the ruptured lines before the entire airframe vanishes in a blinding secondary explosion. Debris rains down toward the ocean, leaving a dark smudge of oil and smoke in the pristine sky. 09:15 hours, high-altitude combat zone. The air is a chaotic tapestry of white smoke trails and jagged black flak bursts. Below, the Philippine Sea is hidden beneath a thick carpet of clouds, leaving the pilot suspended in a violent, sun-drenched arena. The temperature outside the canopy sits at 50 degrees below zero, yet inside the cockpits, the pilots are drenched in sweat. Their breathing is heavy and mechanical, echoing through the comms as they fight the crushing weight of 9 Gs. The smell of recycled air and ozone fills their masks. The calm of the upper atmosphere is gone, replaced by the screaming of engine turbines pushed to their absolute limits. The U.S. formation dives, plunging toward the enemy's inner sanctum. Long-range missiles from the enemy escorts streak through the formation like lightning bolts. One missile narrowly misses a U.S. wingman, its proximity fuse detonating and sending a hail of tungsten cubes through the vertical stabilizer. Metal rips. The stabilizer shreds into ribbons of gray composite material, but the jet holds its line. The pilot wrestling the controls as the aircraft vibrates violently. "Engaging inner screen!" the lead pilot yells over the roar of the slipstream. He slams his stick to the left, and the fighter jet snaps into a blindingly fast roll. The horizon spins 360 degrees in a heartbeat. He acquires a lock on a hostile escort and squeezes the trigger. The aircraft jolts as a medium-range missile drops from the internal bay and ignites. It streaks forward, trailing a thin ribbon of white smoke. The enemy jet attempts a desperate barrel roll, but the missile's seeker head is relentless. It slams into the engine nozzle. A massive fireball erupts, and the enemy aircraft disintegrates into a cloud of burning titanium and shredded aluminum. Directly ahead, the massive AWACS command plane looms like a flying fortress. It is an enormous 4-engine beast with a gargantuan rotating radar dish mounted on its spine. The U.S. pilots see the glint of sunlight off its massive wingspan. It is trying to dive, seeking the cover of the denser air below, while its escorts swarm around it like angry hornets. Tracers from the escort's cannons stitch lines of fire across the sky, bright red streaks passing inches from the U.S. canopies. One U.S. jet takes a hit to the wing. Sparks fly as rounds punch holes through the skin, but the pilot ignores the warning lights and maintains his pursuit. The chaos intensifies as the U.S. jets punch through the final line of defense. They are now within visual range of the command plane. The sheer scale of the AWACS is breathtaking. It dwarfs the agile fighters. Its defensive systems go haywire, spitting out hundreds of silver chaff fragments and burning flares to blind the U.S. sensors. The air is thick with the scent of burning cordite and jet fuel. A U.S. pilot watches as a friendly missile clips an enemy fighter's cockpit. The glass shatters into a million diamonds before the pilot is hurled into the void by his ejection seat. The tactical advantage swings toward the Americans as they clear the immediate airspace of the most dangerous escorts. The flight lead levels his wings and centers his HUD on the massive radar dish of the AWACS. His thumb hovers over the weapon release. The command plane's tail gunner opens fire, a desperate stream of lead spraying toward the oncoming U.S. jets. The bullets thud into the air around them, but the U.S. pilots don't flinch. They have the behemoth in their sights, and the giant is running out of sky. 0920 hours, Western Pacific Combat Corridor. The digital landscape of the cockpits suddenly fractures. Warning tones change from rhythmic pulses to a continuous, high-pitched scream. The primary radar displays, once clear and sharp, dissolve into a static-filled mess of flickering green bars and ghost contacts. The enemy AWACS has unleashed its full electronic warfare suite, pumping out megawatts of white noise to drown out the American sensors. The pilots squint through their visors, their eyes darting from the useless screens to the empty blue void ahead. "I'm blind! Sensors are washing out!" a pilot yells, his voice strained by the physical pressure of a hard bank. The electronic fog is thick, heavy, and disorienting. Navigation systems spin wildly, and the tactical data link drops, leaving each pilot isolated in a world of screaming metal and silence. Without radar, the deadly missiles in their bays are useless hunks of steel. They are flying by instinct now, relying on raw vision and the jagged silhouettes of the enemy against the glare of the sun. The massive Chinese command plane sits at the center of this electronic storm. Its giant radar dish rotates with a slow, mechanical indifference, even as the aircraft banked steeply to avoid the incoming hunters. Around it, the air is thick with the invisible energy of the jammer, a force that makes the pilot's skin tingle and their HUDs jitter. Despite the blindness, the U.S. flight lead refuses to break off. He pushes his throttle into the detent, the engines roaring in defiance as he closes the distance to the source of the interference. He is hunting the giant by the very noise it is screaming. The enemy escorts take advantage of the chaos. A hostile fighter emerges from a cloud bank like a shark, its nose cannon flashing. A stream of 30mm rounds tears through the air, hitting a U.S. wingman's wing root. The impact is brutal. Aluminum skin peels back like an orange, exposing the skeletal frame beneath. Sparks shower the cockpit glass as the wingman's jet rolls violently to the right, smoke pouring from a ruptured fuel line. The pilot fights the stick, his muscles bulging as he forces the crippled jet to level off. His teeth gritted against the vibration of the damaged airframe. Tactical desperation sets in. The flight lead switches his systems to a passive home-on-jam mode, slaving his missile seekers to the exact frequency of the enemy's electronic interference. The tone in his ear changes to a low, steady growl. A lock. He is no longer looking for a reflection. He is aiming at the source of the noise itself. The AWACS crew realizes the danger. They shift frequencies, trying to dance through the electromagnetic spectrum. But the US computers are faster. The lock holds. The massive aircraft is now less than 5 miles away, a gargantuan shadow against the bright Pacific sky. The US pilots can see the individual windows on the fuselage and the dark, recessed engine intakes. The air smells of ozone and heated copper. One of the escort fighters attempts to cross the lead's nose to force a brake, but the American pilot ignores him, focusing his entire world on the massive command plane. He is a predator who has finally found the throat of the beast. 09:25 hours, heart of the engagement zone. The electronic fog lifts as the US pilots dive below the primary jamming lobe, and the dogfight turns into a visceral, close-quarters brawl. The sky is no longer a vast emptiness. It is a claustrophobic arena of intersecting smoke trails and screaming turbines. 2 enemy fighters lunge from the sun's glare, their wings banked at 90 degrees as they attempt to bracket the US flight lead. The American pilot slams his stick to the side, his body crushing into the seat under 9 times the force of gravity. His vision begins to tunnel, the edges of his sight turning gray as blood is forced from his brain. "I've got 2 on my 6, braking high!" the wingman screams. He pulls his nose toward the sun, the jet's engines howling as they fight the laws of physics. Behind him, a hostile missile tracks his heat signature. At the last possible second, he punches a sequence of flares. The burning magnesium candles erupt in a brilliant, blinding fan. The missile's seeker head wavers, bites on a flare, and detonates in a massive sphere of fire and black smoke, just 50 yards behind his tail. The shockwave rattles the jet's canopy, sending a shudder through the pilot's spine. The flight lead reverses his turn with a violent snap roll. He sees the belly of an enemy fighter crossing his HUD. He switches to the internal cannon. He pulls the trigger, and the aircraft vibrates as the multi-barrel gun spits a stream of high-explosive incendiary rounds at 6,000 rounds per minute. The tracers stitch a glowing line across the sky, walking directly into the enemy's cockpit and engine intake. The hostile jet's canopy shatters. The engine explodes in a spectacular spray of fan blades and burning oil, and the aircraft tumbles out of the sky, a headless metal corpse. Directly ahead, the air is thick with debris. A U.S. jet shears through a cloud of shrapnel from a previous explosion. The jagged metal pings off the fuselage like hailstones. The tactical situation is a blur of high-speed passes and desperate maneuvers. An enemy pilot, realizing his escort mission is failing, attempts a head-on kamikaze run toward the U.S. lead. The 2 jets close at a combined speed of over 1,500 miles per hour. The American pilot keeps his cool, his eyes fixed on the closing silhouette. He waits until the last millisecond, then flicks the stick. The 2 aircraft miss each other by a distance of less than 10 feet. The roar of their passing engines sounding like a physical blow. In the distance, the massive AWACS plane is still trying to flee, but its protective circle has been torn open. The U.S. pilots have successfully baited the remaining escorts into individual duels, pulling them away from the high-value target. One U.S. pilot takes a heavy hit to his horizontal stabilizer. The metal rips away, leaving a jagged stump. He yells in frustration as his jet begins a slow, unrecoverable roll toward the ocean. But he manages to stabilize just long enough to see his flight lead clear of the final interceptor. The sky is a graveyard of falling wreckage and blooming parachutes. The smell of hot metal and hydraulic fluid is heavy in the cockpits. The U.S. flight lead levels his wings, his breathing ragged and heavy. He is now alone in a clear corridor behind the massive command plane. The giant is exposed. The escorts are scattered, burning, or out of position. The Predator has finally cleared the path to the heart of the enemy's nervous system. 0930 hours, upper stratosphere. The battle has drifted 10 miles south, a sprawling three-dimensional chess game played at supersonic speeds. The sky is streaked with the lingering white vapor of spent missiles. Two U.S. wingmen bank hard to the right, their afterburners glowing like twin suns as they dive toward the cloud deck. It is a calculated retreat, a tactical feint designed to bleed the energy of the remaining enemy defenders. The ruse works. Three hostile fighters, hungry for a kill, bite the bait. They roll inverted and dive after the fleeing Americans, leaving the high-altitude sector unguarded. Screen is clear, taking the shot. The flight lead growls. He slams the throttle forward, bypassing the detents into emergency power. The fighter jet shudders violently as the engine consumes fuel at a catastrophic rate. He climbs. The G-forces press down on his chest like a concrete slab, squeezing the air from his lungs. He is alone now in the high air, ascending like a rocket toward the lumbering silhouette of the command plane. The massive AWACS is now isolated against the deep blue zenith. Without its swarm of protectors, it looks sluggish and bloated. The giant aircraft banks desperately to the left, its four turbofan engines leaving thick trails of black exhaust as the pilot pushes the airframe beyond its structural limits. The huge rotating radar dish on its spine spins relentlessly, a blind eye looking for help that isn't coming. The distance closes rapidly. 5 miles, 4 miles, 3. A lone enemy straggler, a damaged fighter trailing smoke, attempts a final, suicidal intercept. He cuts across the U.S. lead's flight path, firing a frantic burst of cannon shells. The tracers drift wide, sparking harmlessly off the invisible air currents. The American pilot ignores him. He doesn't deviate. He flies straight through the jet wash of the damaged enemy, the turbulence shaking his cockpit violently. The hostile fighter stalls, its nose dropping toward the ocean as its engine finally seizes. The flight lead levels off directly behind the AWACS. The size disparity is jarring. The command plane fills his entire forward view, a wall of gray metal and rivets. He can see the control surfaces fluttering as the enemy crew fights to keep the beast in the air. The rear warning sensors of the AWACS scream a lock tone, but they have no countermeasures left to deploy. The flare dispensers are empty. The chaff chutes are dry. Inside the U.S. cockpit, the master arm switch is flipped up. The targeting reticle snaps onto the heat signature of the command plane's No. 3 engine. The tone changes from a search warble to a solid, continuous hum. The pilot's thumb rests on the red button. There is no hesitation. The Predator has the prey by the throat, and the sky is silent except for the roar of the kill. 0935 hours. Terminal engagement zone. The lock tone in the pilot's headset is a solid, unyielding shriek. The massive Chinese command plane fills the forward canopy, a gray leviathan struggling against the thin air. Sunlight glints off the rotating radar dish, highlighting the rivets on the fuselage. The U.S. flight lead grips the stick. His gloved thumb slams down on the red weapon release button. The fighter jet jolts upward as 1,000 pounds of ordnance drops free from the internal bay. For a microsecond, the white cylinder hangs suspended in the slipstream. Then, the rocket motor ignites. A blinding flash of orange fire erupts, followed instantly by a thick trail of white smoke. The missile accelerates with violent purpose, breaking the sound barrier in less than a second. It screams toward the target. A robotic predator closing the distance at 4,000 miles per hour. The crew of the AWACS sees the smoke trail. The massive aircraft banks hard to the right, the wings flexing dangerously under the strain. It is a desperate, lumbering maneuver, like a whale trying to dodge a harpoon. The pilot pushes the engines to emergency power, dumping raw fuel into the turbines. Black smoke pours from the exhaust, mixing with the white contrails of the incoming death. Flares burst from the tail, a final, futile flower of burning magnesium. But the radar-guided missile ignores the heat. It sees only the massive reflection of the aircraft's metal skin. The U.S. flight lead executes a hard crank maneuver. He slams the stick to the left, rolling his jet 90 degrees away from the target, while keeping the radar lock illuminated. The G-forces hit him again, compressing his spine, but he cranes his neck to watch the endgame. The missile adjusts its flight path. Tiny control fins twitch, correcting the trajectory with mathematical precision. It does not fly to where the target is. It flies to where the target will be. The distance evaporates. The missile closes the final mile in the blink of an eye. The proximity fuse activates. The warhead primes itself. The AWACS is now helpless, a massive silhouette trapped in the crosshairs of inevitable destruction. The missile streaks past the tail gunner's desperate stream of fire, passing through the bullets as if they were mist. It angles upward, targeting the wing root where the massive fuel tanks join the fuselage. The air between the weapon and the target compresses. The shockwave from the missile's passage ripples across the AWACS aluminum skin. There is no escape. The geometry of the intercept is perfect. The hunter has released the arrow, and the arrow has found its mark. 09:38 hours. Point of impact. The missile strikes the starboard wing root of the command plane. The warhead detonates. A sphere of superheated gas and tungsten shrapnel expands instantly, shredding the aluminum skin and igniting the massive fuel tanks stored within the wet wing. The explosion is absolute. A blinding fireball erupts, brighter than the sun, consuming the entire right side of the aircraft in a millisecond. The structural failure is catastrophic. The starboard wing shears cleanly away from the fuselage, trailing a river of burning jet fuel. The sudden loss of lift throws the massive aircraft into a violent snap roll. The force is brutal. The mounting struts of the giant rotodome buckle under the torsion. The multi-ton radar dish tears loose from the spine of the plane. It tumbles backward through the slipstream, smashing into the vertical stabilizer and slicing the tail section in half. Fire engulfs the central fuselage. The cabin windows blow out simultaneously from the rapid decompression. The aircraft enters a flat, unrecoverable spin. It corkscrews toward the ocean, rotating slowly as it falls. A trail of black smoke, thick and oily, marks its descent. Debris rains down in a widening cone. Sheets of twisted metal, burning avionics equipment, and pieces of the shattered engines. The U.S. flight lead banks his fighter hard to avoid the expanding debris field. He pulls 5 Gs, his wingtips slicing through the thin smoke of the explosion. He feels the physical thump of the shockwave vibrating through his control stick. He levels off and looks back. The once mighty flying fortress is now a burning comet, plunging 20,000 feet into the abyss below. Splash 1, target destroyed, the flight lead states. His voice is flat. He checks his fuel gauge. The digital readout is blinking low. He scans the sky. The radar screen, once a mess of jamming noise, is now perfectly clear. The electronic scream has stopped. The sky is silent again, save for the roar of his own engine. 09:45 hours, over the Philippine Sea. The pillar of black smoke from the fallen command plane dominates the horizon. It stretches from the clouds to the ocean surface, a dark tombstone in the bright blue sky. The cohesive enemy formation crumbles. Without the central guidance and data link of the AWACS, their tactical unity dissolves into panic. The remaining escort fighters break formation, scattering in every direction like a flock of birds startled by a gunshot. The calculated geometry of their air defense collapses into a chaotic rout. The U.S. fighters reassemble. They switch from defensive maneuvers to a predatory offensive. The flight lead issues a single command over the net. Free fire! Clear the sector! The 4 American jets fan out, their radars sweeping the sky, picking off the isolated targets one by one. They push their throttles to military power, conserving what little fuel remains as they hunt down the stragglers. The air is filled with the desperate radio chatter of the enemy pilots, but their calls for support go unanswered. A lone enemy fighter attempts to dive for the deck, pushing his aircraft to Mach 1.5 in a desperate run for the safety of the horizon. A U.S. wingman spots the contrail. He rolls his jet inverted and dives, gravity aiding his acceleration. The chase is short. The U.S. pilot achieves a tone. He fires a short-range, heat-seeking missile. The weapon snakes through the air, trailing a thin line of smoke. The enemy pilot sees the launch and pops a sequence of flares, but the timing is late. The missile slams into the rear stabilizer. The explosion shears the tail section completely off. The enemy jet tumbles end over end, disintegrating under the aerodynamic stress before impacting the water. 2 other hostile jets attempt to turn and fight, but they are uncoordinated and blind. They cross paths dangerously, almost colliding in their confusion. The U.S. flight lead and his number 2 engage them in a classic pincer maneuver. The Americans close the distance rapidly. The lead fires a radar-guided missile at the first bandit. The warhead detonates just above the canopy, instantly killing the pilot and sending the aircraft into a slow, deathly spiral. The second bandit jettisons his external fuel tanks and brakes hard to the west, abandoning the fight entirely. He engages his afterburner, a bright blue flame marking his retreat. The U.S. pilots do not pursue. They have achieved their objective. The sky is clearing. The red icons on the tactical displays flicker and vanish one by one. The roar of combat fades, replaced by the steady hum of engines and the wind rushing over the canopy glass. 1,000 hours, post-engagement sector. The ocean surface churns. The main fuselage of the destroyed command plane hits the water with the force of a meteor. A geyser of white foam, steam, and debris shoots 300 feet into the air. The impact sends a massive circular shockwave, rippling across the waves. Burning jet fuel spreads over the swells, creating a lake of fire that hisses violently as the salt water fights the flames. The tail section follows seconds later, plunging into the depths like a steel tombstone. High above the destruction, the 4 U.S. fighter jets bank in unison. The violence of the dogfight has evaporated, leaving only the high-pitched whine of the engines cruising at subsonic speeds. The pilots scan their instruments. Fuel gauges blink yellow. The adrenaline recedes, replaced by the methodical discipline of the recovery procedures. Status check, the flight lead orders. 2 is green, minor vibration in the port wing, the wingman replies. He looks out his canopy. A jagged tear in the composite skin flutters in the slipstream. A souvenir from a near miss with a flak shell. He adjusts his trim tabs to compensate. The jet flies straight. 3 is Winchester, all ordnance expended. Another voice cuts in. The weapon bays are empty. The external rails are bare. The formation tightens. They turn east, putting the rising sun directly in their path. The glare washes out the cockpit displays for a moment. Far on the horizon, a tiny geometric shape breaks the line of the sea. The aircraft carrier. It turns into the wind, preparing to catch them. The flight lead looks back one last time. The pillar of black smoke from the AWACS marks the battlefield. The enemy fighters are gone. The radar scope is clear. The sky belongs to them. He pushes the throttle forward slightly, and the 4 silver darts accelerate toward home.